I am so flipping scared to make this video. But you know what? Too many people have watched my unorthodox life for me to keep quiet about this. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Batsheva. I run Cynical Duchess, dedicated to travel and fashion around the world. I am an Orthodox Jew and I graduated from Boston University with a degree in film production. So when Netflix releases yet another Orthodox Jewish related TV show that tells me how oppressed I am, I feel like I should probably step in here a little bit and clarify a few things. I'm not saying that Julia Haart doesn't have her own story, which she is perfectly entitled to tell. The thing is that she made a lot of assumptions about modesty, about feminism, about gender roles and education in the Orthodox Jewish community. I come from the same religious spectrum as she does, and what she was describing was absolutely not my nor my friends' experience growing up as proud Orthodox Jewish women. The first discrepancy that I really want to point out is this issue of education that Julia brings up in the show. She claims that she never went through any formal education, that when she finally left the community, she didn't know what to do because she didn't have a degree, she didn't go to college, she wasn't educated. Her husband went to Wharton School of Business, which is in Columbia. Like, I'm just so trying to figure out, like, how did she not have an education when her husband is a flipping Ivy League graduate? I'm like... I went to an Orthodox Jewish all-girls high school where in the morning we delved into Jewish texts, and then in the afternoon we would have secular subjects. Like, I flipping went to Boston University. You think that they would have accepted me with like a fake diploma or not enough education to get in? Like, what do you want to talk to me about? The Romantic period? The Neoclassical period? To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. Hamlet. Shakespeare. Or like, am I not allowed to know those things because I'm an Orthodox Jew? I think a lot of the problems with this show is that Netflix is viewing Orthodox Jewish culture through a Western lens and Western gender roles. And I'm sorry, but American society and Jewish society are not the same thing. We do not have the same mindsets, and we do not look at life in the same manner. And so when you look at our gender roles, when you look at our modesty, you cannot look at it through a Western lens.
But I think to really understand why looking at Judaism through a Western lens can be so harmful, we need to deep dive into American feminism and why things that are uplifting in Jewish culture became so oppressive in American society.
Western women have been angry for a very long time at the way that they have been cheated out of equality by men, both in America and in various other Western countries for a very long time. This has influenced feminism ideology until today, because even the founding and the beginning of America was a man's world, and a woman had to make her way within this man's world. It started in earnest in 1848 after the Seneca Falls Convention, when Elizabeth Cady Stanton and co. so very famously stood up on the podium and said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal." This launched the suffragist movement, which saw millions of women marching down the streets, protesting for property and voting rights. Women finally got the right to vote in 1920. But I mean, we gotta ask ourselves, what were Jewish women doing during this time? How did they feel about the suffragist movement? What does Judaism look upon women owning property? So the Torah brings down a story of the 5 daughters of Tzlafchad, who lived around 1250 BCE during the time of the desert when the Jews were with Moses. Their father had died in the desert, so they go to Moses and they're like, when we go to Israel, we're not going to be able to get any share in the land because we have no brothers and our father just died and we're women. Why is it fair that we're not going to gain any property? And so according to the Torah, Moses goes to God and God says that the daughters of Tzlafchad are correct. They do deserve land. So according to Jewish law, from this story we derive that women are allowed to own and inherit property. So I think to the average Jewish woman living in 1900s United States, what she was probably thinking was, about time. Only 3,000 years late. So we flash forward to the 1930s and a lot more women are going into the workforce due to the Great Depression. But they were still only being relegated to women's work like teaching, secretarial work, or housework. And I think this was very traumatic for Western society and the way that they viewed women, because they were essentially saying that women were not good enough to be within a male sphere, which not only made the female and the woman to be subhuman in the eyes of society, but also relegated traditional female roles to be inferior to that of a male's. Which is why when Frances Perkins became the first woman to join FDR's cabinet, that was such a huge success because she was the first woman to dominate a male sphere. But I think the problem with that is that their achievements still were not actually about the female themselves, but how well they did in relation to a man. One of the biggest examples of that in recent history is Kamala Harris. She is not praised for doing something of her own merit. She's praised because she was able to become the first female vice president. She was able to finally succeed in a male sphere, and that's why we look up to her. I really genuinely don't see that many stories of men succeeding in female spheres and us admiring them for it. And if men and women were truly equal, I ask the question, why are male and female traditional roles also not equal? Why is being a doctor considered more important than being a mom and raising children? And I think in Judaism, we just don't see it like that. We don't necessarily put getting a male job on a higher pedestal than having a traditionally female role. You know, every Friday night at the Shabbat dinner table, every Jewish family sings the song Eishes Chayil, which is dedicated to the woman. Eishes Chayil translates to woman of valor, or woman on the battlefront, and it compares the home to a battlefront because, you know, she sacrifices so much in order to raise her kids and be there for them. It mentions a lot of traditionally female things, you know, cooking and being in the house and being with the children, but it praises the woman for doing all these things beautifully. On the one hand, you could say, well, is that all women are there for in Judaism? Like, you're just supposed to be like a homemaker and that's it? But then again, on the other hand, Jewish people know that, you know, that's not all we're there for. There are so many instances in Jewish history where women have taken on traditionally male roles. For example, Devorah, the judge, she was a judge and head of Israel in around 1200 BCE, and she was the one that led the Jews into battle against the Canaanites. Another instance is Yael. She also lived during the time of Devorah, and she helped against the battle of the Canaanites. So what I learned as a Jewish woman is that I should be proud of whatever role I take on, whether that's a traditionally female role or a traditionally male role. I think the discrepancy here is in American society, it looks down upon traditionally female roles. And so when you translate that into a show like Unorthodox or Orthodox Jews, where a lot of them choose to be homemakers because we place value on that. But when American society looks on that, because they view those roles as inferior and oppressive, they then view Orthodox Jews who choose to do that as oppressed. Which brings me to tokenism and tokenizing ex-Orthodox Jews in the media. You know, I thought long and hard about this. Why does American society, which is one of the most powerful cultural societies in the world, feel the need to tokenize other cultures in order to prove their societal point? I understand, Netflix, that you're trying to prove that immodesty and Western society and humanism is the ultimate paragon of modernity.
But then why do you need defectors from my culture to affirm your lifestyle? Are you that insecure that you need token ex-Orthodox Jews to validate your viewpoint?
And to me, it just boils down to another form of white saviorism. Netflix doesn't only do this with Orthodox Jewish culture. One show, Elite, featured a Muslim character, and it got me so riled up, like I could barely watch this show. When do they show her as liberated and empowered? When she takes off her hijab. Let's show you, the Muslim character, how Western culture and society can save your life. Let's show you how much better your life is now that you're a modern Western woman. Let's take off that hijab and empower you. But I think what's the most frustrating about this white saviorism and ethnocentrism and tokenization in shows that Netflix creates and other forms of media, because my story never gets told. Yes, I'm an Orthodox Jew, but I also travel the world. I know Korean, I speak a little bit of Chinese, I graduated from college with a degree in film production, and I work in entertainment and social media. Like, why do I feel the need? Like, I have to defend my choices all the time. Like, no, I'm not oppressed. Yes, I'm happy with my choice in being modest. Yes, I'm happy that I'm waiting till marriage for snacks. Like, just let me live my life and empower me like you do other minority women. I think we just need to normalize not ridiculing foreign cultures within the media. We do not ridicule Native Americans who choose to connect with their culture. We do not ridicule African people who choose to elongate their lips with plaits. We do not ridicule Muslim women who choose to wear hijab. We do not ridicule American people who choose to cover their bodies in tattoos and piercings. And we do not ridicule Orthodox Jews who choose to wear a yarmulke on their head or cover their head when they are married. And what's so sad is that if Netflix really wanted a counterpart of an Orthodox Jew who's a boss in the fashion world and a CEO, they had that. There's a woman named Joyce Azria. She's the daughter of Max Azria, who is the founder of BCBG Max Azria. She is an Orthodox Jewish woman. She covers her hair, she's modest, and she was the creative director of BCB Generation since she was 26. A few years ago, she left and struck out on her own, and she has multiple clothing lines where she works as CEO and head fashion designer. And she is a fully kosher-eating, wig-wearing, modest woman, and I am so proud of her and so inspired by her. Joyce Azria is literally the Orthodox version of Julia Haart. Netflix could have easily chosen to make a reality show about her, and arguably it would have been more interesting to see how she combined her religion with a high-powered job. Sometimes Netflix, it doesn't pay to be biased.
I'm not saying that Julia Haart doesn't deserve to have her story told. Her experiences are valid, but it's on Netflix to be sensitive enough to tell a spectrum of stories, even within one minority group. To keep telling the same shade of story over and over shows an implicit bias in the way Netflix handles Orthodox Jews, and goes against their apparent messaging of lifting up minority voices.
So another thing that Orthodox Jews get lambasted on the show and just in general in the media is the fact that we dress modestly. See, look at me. Everything is covered up, my neckline, I am not showing my elbows, I cover my knees and I'm only wearing a skirt. So how do Jewish people view modesty, and why do I feel empowered dressing in a way that Western society deems oppressive? For us, clothing has always signified dignity. It's what separates us from animals. Animals don't have to wear clothes. In Jewish culture, clothing signifies civilization, society, intelligence, dignity, royalty. I mean, according to Jewish culture, it's really only slaves and people like that who were unclothed. I mean, in the Holocaust, they stripped us naked in order to make us subhuman. They took away our clothes. They took away our dignity. That was the first thing they did to us in order to make us submissive and subhuman. And I mean, you see that even in Western society, like royalty. When you think about Queen Elizabeth II, she's always dressed in a skirt or pants, but she's always modest. Even Princess Kate, I mean, before she was a royal, she may have done a few like bikini runways, which is totally fine. But once she entered royal society, she was given guidelines on how to dress. Not because she's oppressed. I mean, she's literally in like one of the highest positions of power, like figurehead, but because royalty dresses in a certain way and they understand that. Royalty always dresses in a dignified way. Okay, so like before you come at me and be like, oh my god, so what are you saying, that being immodest means that you are being oppressed or whatever? No, hold up. I think when it comes to American modesty, people want to view their bodies as beautiful. And because for so many years in American history, modesty was used as an oppressive tool to either sexualize the woman or keep the woman submissive, nowadays, as a backlash, people are using skin and immodesty as a way to reclaim their bodies and show how proud and empowered they are from it. At the end of the day, for Jewish people, clothing signifies control. It puts me in the control of who gets to view my body and when. You don't get to see my breasts. You don't get to see my elbow. Not if I don't show it to you. I am so lucky that I live in a world that I get to decide how I get dressed in the morning. And I feel so empowered bringing that attention to my eyes and my face and my essence. And I get to do that by covering parts of my body up in order to play out other parts of myself. I think both schools of thought are totally okay, whether you think that covering up means that you are reclaiming your humanity or showing off skin means that you're reclaiming your humanity. I think the problem with My Unorthodox Life and other Orthodox Jewish shows like that on Netflix is that they don't respect the Orthodox Jewish view on modesty as dignity. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm saying that I fully respect Western American society and their empowerment in their immodesty. So I'm kindly asking that Western society and Western media and Netflix do the same thing for my culture. Why do I have to be oppressed in Western media just because you use an ethnocentric lens in order to view my culture? And I just want to say to any person who chooses to lead a specific lifestyle, regardless of what that is, don't let anybody ever make you feel like you are oppressed or inferior for the lifestyle that you choose to lead. Be empowered by your choices, and if Netflix is giving you a hard time, just give them the finger. And I'll see you next week.